Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the T&E Committee. Welcome, Ms. Reed and all the commissioners and your team.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Hucker, Council Members Glass and Reamer. I'm Carla Reed, the General Manager and CEO of Wssc, and it is our pleasure to be here today to present our FY 2020 budget. And just going to take a couple of seconds to introduce who's at the table with me. First, on your right are our commissioners, Commissioner Hallie Dennis and Commissioner Fausto Bayonet. And on your left are our CFO, Patty Cohan, our our Deputy General Manager for Operations, Mr. Jay Price, and our Budget Director, Ms. Letitia Carolina Powell.
Welcome.
So, our budget. First of all, I'd just like to say that the men and women of Wssc are just actively every single day, working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to make sure that we deliver clean, safe water to all of our customers here in Montgomery County as well as Prince George's County. We've been honored to do that for more than 100 years, and we've done it every single year, all of those 100, without one single water quality violation. And I think in addition to our track record for being good environmental stewards, I'd also like to talk about our great financial track record. Since 2001, Wssc has maintained a AAA bond rating from all three bond rating agencies. And our nearly $1.5 billion fiscal year 20 proposed budget has carefully developed to continue this unparalleled commitment to water quality, safety, and financial stability. Our proposed budget creates jobs, it supports our local businesses, and it fosters continual economic growth throughout Montgomery and Prince George's counties. Now, approximately 30% of Wssc's spending goes to small, local, and minority businesses. And what that equated to last year is more than $146 million going to minority-owned businesses and more than $41 million going to small and local businesses. So investing in our water and sewer infrastructure also helps to support the local Montgomery County businesses and grow our entire local economy. We also recognize the need to improve customer service and affordability efforts. This budget provides funding to improve call service operations, assist customers facing high water and sewer bills, and enhance our customer affordability programs all in the same process. It also supports the implementation of a crucial IT modernization that we call Project Cornerstone. This massive IT project will completely upgrade two outdated enterprise-wide computer systems that have been in existence for more than 25 years. Under the direct management of our CIO, and Project Cornerstone will allow us to not only implement our new modern simplified rate structure, it will also help us to more efficiently schedule and track work orders in the field and eventually move to monthly billing, all of which will improve our service to our customers by providing them with real-time data about water and their consumption as well as the repair work that they might have in process. Simply put, the successful implementation of Project Cornerstone is our #1 priority for fiscal year 19 as well as fiscal year 20. So, you might ask, why are we asking for a 5% rate increase? Well, the 5% rate increase is going to help us to invest in all of the capital improvements in our capital improvement program. We're continuing our aggressive efforts to replace our aging water and sewer infrastructure, and a critical undertaking that when you consider we have over 40% of our infrastructure is over 50 years old. So maintaining the current level of investment in our capital program is the driving force behind the need for this increase. What are the consequences of not getting a 5% increase, or getting a lower than 5% increase. The projects will be delayed, and it's eventually going to drive up the costs of those same projects and require us to ask for a larger rate increase next year. So we are mindful that we are funded by our ratepayers, and we remain vigilant stewards with the public's money. That is why we continue to look forward to opportunities where we can control our costs and save our customers money in the FY20 budget without negatively impacting customer service. We are pleased to detail these cost controls and efficiencies in today's presentation. Now, I talked about the rate structure. I want to talk about it in relationship or connection to our Project Cornerstone project. That's going to be implemented on July the 1st, right after July 1st. As many of you may recall, WSSC our commissioner selected a new rate structure last July following a big, transparent, and collaborative public process involving nationally renowned rate structure experts, an authority from Maryland on water conservation, and extensive customer outreach. And when I say extensive, I mean extensive. Our commissioners required us to do this outreach, and so we ended up with more than 30 public meetings that we held since the spring of 2017. They were attended by 1,500 customers, and they generated about 300 comments about the proposed rate structure. Additionally, all these meetings were live streamed and seen by nearly 2,500 viewers. Our extensive, transparent outreach efforts will continue as we get closer to the expected go-live date in July. As a matter of fact, in our pipelines, you may have seen an article in our April to June customer pipeline, as well as January to March. We had articles about the rate structure. Additionally, we're going to have 3 open houses, and you may have seen this come in your mail, talking about the 3 open houses that we're going to have to help customers understand our new 4-tier rate structure and the proposed increase to how they will impact their bills. So we're going to have an online bill calculator so they can see what their current bills are like and what it would be like under the new rate structure. So our first open house is going to be this upcoming Tuesday, next week, May the 7th, from 6:30 to 8:30 at Walter Johnson High School. And so that rate calculator tool I told you about is also on our website. So we'll be talking a lot about that at the open house. And the new 4-tier rate structure gets us away from or replaces the current 16-tier rate structure that we have, which has been in place for 25 years. With the new rate structure, our customers will be charged for the water they use within each tier as opposed to charging for all the water at the highest tier. So that, we feel, makes and I'm sure our customers will too, makes it more fair. The new rate structure is also going to promote conservation, and it's going to help save our customers money by encouraging wise water use. When the rate structure is implemented, we will, with the proposed 5% rate increase, a family of 3 that uses an average amount of water per quarter, which is about 15,000 gallons, will see a quarterly bill go up about $4. Even with that modest increase, it still costs less than 2 pennies per gallon to have a gallon of safe, clean water and have it delivered to your faucet 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And not even bottled water can compete with the safety, the cost, and the convenience of WSSC water. And so now I will turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Patty Callahan, for the presentation.
Thank you. Try to lean in a little far, but we're going to walk through a presentation. I'm relatively new at WSSC, like some of our council members, so we were asked to do a presentation. If you have any questions, please ask them of everybody else. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to try to answer some of those questions myself. Okay. First of all, WSSC's strategic plan. As we always say, it's safe, reliable water, the precious resource that we have, and return it in a clean way to our environment. That's very important. We hear it all the time. In fact, it's recited during our commission meetings. It's really infiltrated throughout WSSC. It's very impressive. We've given you our vision, our strategic priorities, our core values, and our guiding principles. What is WSSC? At a glance, we were created in 1918. We have over 100 years of service, 6 commissioners. We provide water and sewer for both counties, 1.8 million of our residents. It's important to note that we have no tax dollars that support our budgets, entirely reliant on our rate revenue, and we are a recognized leader in the wastewater and water industries. At a glance, you can see the facilities that we have, water filtration, water recovery facilities, and so forth. And we've highlighted a couple of the key facilities here in Montgomery County. So there, you can see them, look in our CIP. Of course, you can find out about them on our websites, but we just referred to a couple of them in the presentation. What's really impressive at WSSC in my short time there in the 6 months is the culture of innovation. They not only have a staff that works on the establishment of innovation and research regularly, so they have a council that's staff-driven. They also have a commissioner's engagement where they have an innovation and research committee, and this really drives creative thought in some of the projects that you'll hear about today. We have dedicated staff positions that focus on innovation and research, and we don't have that. Sometimes it just falls to the wayside, so that's really impressive. And they've leveraged relationships. Here we are, right in this area. We can work with universities, we can work with Water Environment Federation, research foundations. There's just so many ways that we can leverage other entities with our work. So what have we been doing? We've got a culture of innovation. In our current status, these are some of the projects and where they stand right now. There was a successful implementation of a zinc-coated ductile iron pipe program that was important, an ongoing pipe leak detection programs. We have some enhanced biological phosphorus removal programs. And what's really interesting is that Piscataway bioenergy project, where we're actually going to have energy created and we're going to reduce the hauling costs. So quite innovative and very interesting. I wasn't here during 2018, but these are some of the accomplishments of WSSC. As our general manager spoke, we had a new rate structure that's been adopted, ready to roll out July 1. We have record contributions to something called our WSSC Water Fund, and that's monies that we raise. There's contributions in there to help our customers that have difficulty paying their bills. It's really important. We're recognized excellence in plant performance, and we have the longest acoustic fiber optic pipe protection in the USA, and of course 100+ years without a water quality violation. However, we have some challenges, and like other water utilities nationwide, we are facing some fiscal challenges and some operational challenges. We are aging infrastructure environment here in Montgomery and Prince George's counties. When you have an entity that's over 100 years, you have pipes, some of them over 80 years, some over 50. Other water utilities might be younger and not have such aging infrastructure that requires intense capital investment. So when you see our budget proposal and we look at what our rate is, almost the entire increase in our rate went to fund debt service in these capital projects. Again, we have no revenues, tax revenues going into our budget, entirely revenue-based. So looking at this next chart is an interesting challenge, and it's not just to WSSC, but other water utilities nationwide are seeing this. The blue bars present the flat use or production of water. So our customer, the use of our water is flat. The population is growing. That's the green line. But the per capita usage is declining. So that makes an even more challenging environment when you're trying to keep reasonable rates. Taking a look at our current budget, again, the budget and the increases are driven by the capital costs and debt service. These were a couple of the projects you heard about during the capital improvement program work sessions that you had, so I won't review them now, but they're pretty significant and they come with a high cost. In response, WSSC has spent quite a lot of time, I'm having trouble operating this and talking at the same time. There we go. We've tried to have some cost control measures, and one of the most effective is something called supply chain management transformation. They have a group, a full team that gets together. We look at procurement, we look at cost of goods, services provided, and try to find ways to deliver that in a less expensive manner. And over the time period, we have saved $80 million since 2013, just working with that group and finding better ways to buy goods and services. We've also focused on the Spending Affordability Committee guideline process, and you all may be very familiar with that, but in the past it wasn't as focused on the capital improvement program and the debt required and the pressure that puts on rates. So this past year, that was very much the focus. We reduced the bond-funded projects in the CIP by $160 million to drive down that cost. And of course, there is an impact on that. Some of the projects got pushed out and some got reduced. We're also always looking for debt service savings. We had some refinancings back in FY18. I can't remember the savings. It might have been about $18 million. We did a small one just this spring, another $3 million in savings, but we're always looking for ways to reduce our costs. And through the debt reduction, we saved another about $50 million in a 6-year plan. Other ways we're controlling costs. We've been freezing our positions for quite a few years. There are 30 frozen positions. There's a lot of pressure on that, but we're continuing to not ask for additional positions. We watch overtime very closely. We have a monthly report on overtime. We're watching it all the time to make sure it stays reasonable. Like other agencies, we focused on group insurance and the benefits that we offer. We want them to be competitive but affordable. So we've had some savings in those areas, both looking at our prescription drug costs, keeping our medical costs lower. In fact, I think 2018, we had one plan that went up 2.5% and one in, I think, 2019, maybe 3%, but very low growth on those benefit plans, which is quite difficult to do. Energy conservation savings, $17.5 million, and we're always focused on our workers' compensation costs. This is a quick chart. It's a little hard to read from where we're sitting, but it just talks about the process where we are now. We're at the subcommittee. We'll be meeting with Montgomery and Prince George's County together to talk about this budget because it's by county, and that happens on May 9th. And then, of course, we adopt the budget as a whole. This next picture takes a look closely at 4 of the measures that we watch very closely during the spending affordability process. We want to look at our water and sewer operating expenses, our debt service, the amount of debt we issue, and of course the water rate revenue increases. So key is that 5%, our proposed budget has met the 5% rate increase target, a rate revenue increase target that was set by the committee. You can see the operating expenses, our debt service, new debt, and the revenues associated with that. We have a slight increase on the operating expenses because we had some additional revenues that were not rate related, and we were able to utilize that to have a little bit more capacity on the expenditure side. This is our 6-year plan. There's also, this presentation is in our budget, so you can take a look at that. What's key in the 6-year plan? The rate increases. We do see with the current capital program as it is portrayed in our 2020 to 2025 CIP program, that rate increases would be necessary to fit them in the future budget. Looking at 21 and 22, there's some capacity where we still have to cut some additional expenses, $10 million in each of those years, but we believe this is a doable program. The bottom of that page is really critical. When we prepare our 6-year plan, we focus on metrics, and these are the 4 most important. You want to look at your debt service coverage. Ours is 1.1. That's your net revenues after your expenses. How can you cover your debt? Look at your debt service as a percentage of your total expenses. We're pushing right up against that target. Our reserve is at 10%, which is important to us, and then the days cash. And looking at the total 6 years, we're within all of those metrics, but it's fairly tight, and a lot of water and utilities will actually have more than a year or 2 days cash on hand. This is our proposed budget. You'll see more about that as we go forward. It was fairly tough when we put our budget together this year because the operating departments initially proposed budget increase of about $60 million. That would have been over a 9% rate increase, and we had to make cuts before we even prepared our proposal. So how did we do that? We closed a $30 million gap on operations, IT projects, facilities renovations, and OPEB, other post-employment benefits. These are some of the projects that, I'm not doing this very well, am I? There it is. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, you just passed it. You just passed it.
There we go. Okay, I'm going to ask you to push that one. I can't remember to push that. Okay, this is teamwork. So when we look at our budget before you, look at our revenues before we had the rate increase, and that's what this picture portrays. You can see the $30 million in the middle of the, in the middle of the slide there, where we had to take reductions. And the biggest increases are the debt service, that's 4.7%, and the regional sewage disposal, which is almost 1%. So when you look at the 5% increase, that's where it went. And at the bottom of this slide, you can see the revenue that we needed to generate in order to close what was remaining of the gap, and that was about $31 million. Go. All right, so the 2020 budget in a nutshell, it was $1.5 billion, the 5% rate increase. We did have the customer assistance program that our general manager talked about, set originally $888,000 with an additional $1 million this year to provide more assistance. There's no increase to our ready-to-serve charges. Those are your account maintenance and your infrastructure investment fees. Those are the fixed fees in your bills. No new positions. Deferred planned maintenance, of course, had to occur in order to fit within our budget. Looking at our operating budget without any debt service increases and without any increase for the regional sewage disposal, which is Blue Plains, that we pay them both for operating and capital investment, it would have gone up only 1%. So a very tightly constrained budget. What's included in the 2020 budget? Funding the replacement of 25 miles of water mains, 26 miles of sewer mains and lateral lines, complying with our consent decrees, $46 million for large diameter pipe rehabilitation, our new water and sewer debt, almost $385 million to be issued next year, and the debt service. $306 million of debt service in the water and sewer funds, $319 total. And $59 million is that share that we pay to Blue Plains. Still, our water rates look very competitive when looking at cross jurisdictions. This is on a monthly basis. Our 19 was $71.31. 2020, it would be $72.61. So we're on the lower end of regional billings.
Is that dollars?
Dollars.
The average bill?
That's monthly. You multiply it by 3 to get a quarterly bill.
But that's an average bill?
That's an average bill. And I think that's based on the 3-member family. 3-member family. This takes a look at our average monthly bill and compares it to median income. And if you look at WSSC, ours is again on the low end of this trend line. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency considers a combined water and wastewater bill of less than 4.5% of the median household income to be affordable, and we're at 0.99% when you look at ours for 2020. So that's a very favorable comparison. Taking a look at our cumulative rate increases, again comparing us with Arlington, Baltimore City, the CPI, and DC, you can see that we're the blue bar. We are lower than the others, and again, that's part of the stress that we have fiscally right now. So that was very quick in a nutshell. I was said to do that in 10 or 15 minutes. I did my best to rush through it and hopefully didn't lose anybody. We're happy to answer any questions, and if there aren't any, I'll pass it back to Keith, I believe. So thank you for your time and allowing us to provide that presentation to you.
Yeah, actually, I definitely want to go to Mr. Levchenko. I probably should have already. Sorry, so just wave at me. But first time before the committee, thank you. You did a masterful job. Would you mind going back just one quick slide? I just want you to, can you repeat the takeaway there? Because certainly at our previous hearings, we heard some criticism in terms of your rates compared to Fairfax, and I know Mr. Levchenko's looked into this as well, but if you could restate your point there, I just want to make sure the millions listening at home take this away.
One of the key points is Fairfax does not have sewer, so that's a key point. Also, I don't believe they're as old as we are here at WSSC, so they don't have as much of the capital investment. But the key point, we compared ourselves on this chart to Arlington, Baltimore, the CPI, and DC Water, and we are far below the others. We're the blue bar. We're half if you compare us to Baltimore City, and much lower than all of the others. So very, very competitive, and they've done a wonderful job here at WSSC. I'm brand new, but it's pretty remarkable what they've done. So thank you for allowing me to put that plug in.
Thank you. It's easier to have you repeat it than answer my mail.
There is more, and there is more detailed information, especially about the comparison with Fairfax County in the packet.
There's great information in the packet. Thank you.
You can look at that or get it online.
Which page is that?
That's on page 7 and 8 of the
Folks
packet.
that are watching, thank you. Right? Yep, 7 and 8. Terrific. Okay. continue, please.
And they stole a lot of my thunder with their presentation, but I did want to emphasize a couple of things that they mentioned. If you look at their operating budget, the proposed operating budget of $817.4 million, that's a 4.6% increase. But as you heard, if you remove the debt service from that, and actually put aside the DC water charge for a moment, but just the debt service, the increase drops to only 2.1%. And then if you take the DC water charge out, then it's 1.1% that you heard. So that's covering all of the normal operating expenses you'd expect. Compensation, which I've noted in the packet as well, all the kinds of inflators that you'd expect in an agency, especially with regard to Wssc, chemical costs, electricity, all those other industrial costs that a lot of other other agencies in the county don't have to deal with. So from staff's perspective, it is a very modest budget. They did have to accommodate or identify internal savings in order to fund those additions that they did want to do. And as Patty mentioned, we don't see a lot of that here because that didn't even make it into their proposed budget. So that's sort of where we're starting from with this budget. There are a couple of items that we do want to make sure we do focus on, and I'll try to run through my packet quite briefly, just covering the items that were not covered initially in the presentation. First, I did want to mention that we did get the recommendation from the executive on March 15th. He actually recommended approval of the Wssc budget as proposed by Wssc. So that is important. We did have obviously another reviewing agency look at this, and executive staff are here as well if you want to query them about their review. The rate increases, I also talked about that a good bit in the packet starting on page 6. And this is something I put in these packets the last couple of years, partly because we do get feedback from folks about why are we seeing these above inflation increases each year. And then also with the rate structure change, that adds another dimension to it. But I think the chart on page 6 is important because it shows two different numbers. It shows the cumulative rate increases over time. And this goes, I actually have it going back to 99 and then also from fiscal year 05. I end the comparison in FY15 because that's when we made some changes to the fixed fees that to some degree mess up the equation after that. But I think just these years are illustrative. And the big takeaway on this chart is that if you look at the budget is increasing a lot less than rates. And one might say, why is that? And it's because the rates have to cover not only expenditures, but they have to cover revenue shortfalls. And if you recall earlier, you saw the chart about water production, and per capita water usage is down substantially. Our water production is about the same now as it was 20 years ago, and we've had a 20+% increase in population. So that has to get absorbed, and the existing rate structure actually exacerbates that because customers pay more the more water they use. Conversely, they pay less the less water they use, and it's magnified by the fact that you're paying at the highest rate. So that also had created some revenue volatility on the volumetric side, and that is by far their highest revenue source, about 90% of their revenue. So expenditures are only part of it. The rate increase is also there to accommodate this volatility on their revenue side. So that's important. And then on the rate structure side itself, on page 10 of the packet, I just have a quick chart I wanted to provide some illumination to the committee. I looked at 3 different customer categories, and there's 3 columns shown for customer cost, and actually the gallon usage got cut off on this chart, but the leftmost column for customer is a 55 gallon a day customer, which would basically be a single customer household. Then you have 137 gallon a day, which would be your 2.5 per capita customer, and then the 500 gallons a day would be a large volume residential customer or a relatively small volume commercial customer. And I looked at how those customers would be affected by under the new rate structure, which is row 1. You can see the 4 different tiers, and then further down I show the FY19 rates plus 5%. That would be the equivalent of what the rates would be next year under the existing rate structure. And the important numbers here are in rows 3 and 4. You can see the effective billing rate per 1,000 gallons. And this shows the dynamic that was discussed quite a lot over the last couple of years. With the current rate structure charging at the highest tier, customers that use more water have been paying a lot more per gallon than customers that use less water. So when that rate structure is changed, the effect is that lower volume customers are going to see a bump in their cost, apart from any rate increase. And the higher volume customers are going to see a decline. And a lot of the discussion over the last couple of years was how do we modulate that to a reasonable level so we don't have rate shock on those low volume customers, or a unusually or unnecessarily high rate drop for some of the higher volume customers where we're actually trying to encourage conservation. And it was a balancing act. They had to balance that among a number of other policy criteria. And this rate structure does show that the effective rate for a 55-gallon per average usage per day customer is going to go up from $10.01 combined charge to about $11.89 effectively for that 1,000 gallons. And then for the 137-gallon per day customer, you're seeing the rate also go up a little bit. And then for the 500-gallon a day customer, you see the rate the effective rate go down. So that's an important factor to remember. So some customers, especially the very low volume customers, are going to see a higher increase than they otherwise would with just a 5% rate increase. So that's just a fact of raising the same amount of revenue but adjusting how the rates are charged. And so you've got a closed system. You're going to have to raise the same amount of money. You push in here, it pulls out there. So that's it's just an important recognition, and that's why WSC is doing a lot of customer outreach to make sure people understand that component and where they fit within that with their rate calculator. Let's see. Another piece of business the council has...
I'm sorry, I don't know if there's any questions.
Oh, I'm done with that.
I meant to compliment you on your extremely thorough and helpful packet. But just on the new rate structure, because this is the first time I think this committee has really talked about it, but there's been a lot going forward preceding this hearing. Can you also remind us, what was it that triggered the 2016 rate structure study?
Well, it's interesting. The rate structure it had come up off and on for many years. It is a very old rate structure and unique, as best we can tell, to the country.
Right.
But what really pushed it, I guess, over the top to get it done this time was a decision by an administrative judge working for the Maryland Public Service Commission that identified the old rate structure as being unreasonably discriminatory in nature, and that WSSC should undertake a study to revise the volumetric rate structure.
Right. And you had a unique, as Keith said, structure that you inherited, Ms. Reed, but it's been many years of work to get to this point where you have a new structure in place. Please proceed. Sorry.
So, Chair Tucker and council members, that was in 2016 when I came to WSSC, and as part of my transition into WSSC, it was on my list to look at the rate structure because I knew that it had been in existence for 25 years and at least needed a review. And then the perfect storm came when we got that ruling.
Okay. Sorry. Please go ahead. I think that background's important for folks that might be following this for the first time.
Just proceeding through the packet, I'm just trying to touch upon some of the points I want to make sure the committee hears more about. The system development charge is something that both councils act on each year by resolution. WSC is not recommending any change in the charge for FY20. However, there is a recommended increase in what's called the maximum allowable charge, which is allowed to go up by a CPI adjustment each year, so that is included here. The system development charge is intended to cover growth-related costs in the system. So the regular ratepayer revenue is not intended to support growth. Growth is intended to be supported by the system development charge and, of course, other alternative sources such as contributions from developers. And so it is a closed system. And we looked at a little bit more on the CIP side in terms of the 6-year review out, and staff felt that we could get by without an increase at this point. Actually, a lot of the growth-related projects, we had a big bump in growth-related projects that have been funded over the last 5 or 6 years, and that really did tax the fund a bit. But over the next 6 years, we have a lower level of expenditure, and so these rates right now seem adequate at this time. It is something we review each year. As you heard earlier on page 12 of the packet, just briefly, the account maintenance fee and infrastructure investment fee are not recommended to change. I will say, however, that with the volumetric rate now resolved and a new rate structure in place, this is the next area to look at because the infrastructure investment fee is now will be entering its 5th or 6th year, and it was intended to be revisited after that time. The account maintenance fee is something that gets recalibrated periodically as well. But I will say that WSSC's fixed fees, which these are, make up a relatively small portion of its budget compared to other water and sewer utilities. And arguably, WSSC's fixed costs are significantly higher than what these fixed fees cover. And so it is something that they should look at periodically, and I think we will be seeing some movement on that. And in fact, the rate structure exercise provided some good information going forward that they can utilize for this. And the new billing system you've heard about also provides some more innovative ideas going forward that we can incorporate into bills in the future. If you're looking at time of use, for instance, other kinds of charges, we'll have a little more flexibility under the new billing system than we did under the old. You also heard about the customer assistance program. Just of special note, WSSC did get enabling authority from the state legislature this session to provide a benefit to what we call their indirect customers. These are customers that utilize WSSC water, but because they are part of a master meter, they don't pay a bill directly to WSSC. They pay it to their landlord or their condo association, and this will enable WSSC to reach those customers, some of whom may well be the most needy in the system. And this is something they're going to have to work on over the next year to figure out how to do it. It is not something that is done elsewhere in the country, so this is something they will be trailblazing on a bit. And the $1 million you heard earlier that they were adding to their customer assistance, some of that may be going towards this program.
I was going to say, I think that bill's a terrific idea. Ms. Reed, how do you track the individual water uses by apartment unit, for example? Or do you have to?
They are master metered, well, you know, they're master metered.
Right.
And then there's a unit count that we use to determine what the bill will be based on the number of actual individual units in the complex.
So there's no you don't have to, and there's no additional technology to break down what any individual to establish the eligibility for the program.
Not at this time. That's the next step in the process, to do, as you know, the advanced metering infrastructure, and then that will be able to give us the detailed information we have on individual customer usage.
Terrific. I'm really glad you're supporting that initiative, and I think you're absolutely right. It's going to help a lot of our neediest families.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and the current program piggybacks off of the Maryland Energy Assistance Program for eligibility, so that WSSC doesn't have to get into the eligibility means testing business. Mm-hmm. They can utilize an existing scale that's out there. And so I expect something along those lines could be pursued to try to get to the indirect customer. But once again, because WSSC doesn't have a customer relationship with them, they've got to figure out how to get over that hurdle and figure out how to get that benefit directly to that customer and make sure it's an appropriate benefit. I mean, the other way to do it is to go through the association or the landlord, but that's one step removed from the person that needs the benefit, and that creates some concern about whether it would be passed through or not.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I didn't quite follow you. You described the advanced metering infrastructure. That works in apartment buildings per apartment unit? I was thinking of it just as for the whole building, whether it's a house or, but no?
You know what? I think you might be right.
Okay.
So our customer service director is here, and she's been doing some preliminary work on how we're going to determine, so I'll ask her. Crystal, do you have anything to add?
Good afternoon, Crystal Knightley, Director of Customer Service.
Please press the button there at the base of the microphone.
I'm sorry. Good afternoon, Crystal Knightley, Director of Customer Service. I don't have anything to add, but just to say that we'll be doing a lot of work to determine how we're going to get that benefit extended to the apartment, to the renters. I think originally the question was about the unit count billing.
Right, I mean, I guess one of your methodologies is to take the water of the whole building and then divide it by the number of units in the building.
That's right.
And you're not going to be installing individual meters in each unit in the future, correct?
That is correct.
Unless, I suppose,
For-
the landlord wanted
For
to do
Prince
that.
George's County.
I mean, there are some cases where buildings will convert from a master meter to individual meters.
Okay,
But as you can imagine, that varies in expense from building to building. Not
Right.
something you'd want to just do universally. It'd be very expensive. The advantage of that, of course, is then you link the conservation piece directly to the unit.
right.
It's better, and new buildings are built with individual meters. But we have a lot of grandfathered buildings that are not.
Okay, that's enough. Thanks.
Councilmember Glass.
I have questions just overall.
Overall, okay. We'll keep going.
So page 16 of the packet, I have a chart showing the major expense categories. And this emphasizes the point earlier about the impact of debt service and the regional sewage disposal charge. As you see on table 7, I've got the approved FY19 expenses, the proposed FY20, and then the dollar change and the percent change. And then I've got a lot of description in the packet that I'm just going to quickly summarize. But you can certainly see the debt service piece. You're seeing a $25 million increase. This is despite the fact that we are trying to contain debt service and have made some reductions. This would have been otherwise higher. But even so, that's about an 8.7% change in that line item. And then the regional sewage disposal, which is based on formulas consistent with the intermunicipal agreement with the regional DC Water Authority and various other partners, that would be a 10% increase. Interestingly, salary and wages, which typically is a significant portion of other agency budgets, if you think of MCPS, it's about 90% of their budget. It's a relatively small portion of WSSC's budget. Even if you count in benefits, it's still only about 25% of their budget. And even so, it's not recommended to go up substantially. I do note in the packet they have COLAs and merit increases that are comparable to what we're seeing in our agreements, absent the makeup step increase that the council's talked about. That's not included within this. But your regular COLA, the 2.5% type COLA, and the merit increases, which here are 3.5%, theirs vary. Those are comparable, and staff does feel that we do try to achieve comparability with the WSSC compensation increases with our general workforce here, and staff does see that as being comparable this year. So that's something that I think we were able to agree on. Heat, light, and power, which for years was going up substantially as we had significant increases in utility rates. WSSC has been able to stabilize that over time through a combination of the rates themselves not going up as much, but also through its energy conservation efforts and uses of a private contractor to build improvements and share in the energy savings over time. That's been an effort that's been going on for about a decade, and they are an extremely large energy user, as you can imagine, and 24/7. So we're actually seeing a decrease in their proposed expenditures under heat, light, and power. The all other category is where you're going to see pretty much everything else, including employee benefits, as well as chemical costs, other professional services costs. And that number I mentioned that's only going up 1.5%, which is relatively small. And that, I think, it's a testament to their internal cost cutting and awareness that they're trying to stay within their numbers and have reasonable rate increases. So that's sort of a brief summary of where they are on the operating side. And when you add all those up and you include the revenue projections, that's where you get the 5% rate increase that you need in order to balance that additional $30 million that they had mentioned. And actually on page 19 of the packet, I try to summarize the revenue and the expenditure side. You saw a similar chart in the presentation. And this just walks you through the revenue categories, the expenditure categories, the gap that is generated from the above assumptions, and that 5% rate increase that's needed to offset that gap.
No question.
And
I have a revenue question.
yeah,
So I did see you have something here similar to what was presented in the slide with the FY 2020 budget overview, the table. Could you please go to that, Mandy?
which table is that?
The one with the, it was 17, slide 17. In your presentation, Patty.
I thought it was this one. It's not this one with the 5%, where we showed the 30 million?
17? Okay, so,
Yeah, this is their long-range fiscal plan. So basically what I was showing you was that first year of this plan.
yeah,
Going out, they did note that to meet all these assumptions and stay within their metrics that they recommend at the bottom of that chart, they're looking at 5.5% to 6% rate increases in the out years.
is this the right time to talk about this?
Go ahead.
So what's driving, I mean, I see there's not a work year increase, but there's a huge revenue increase. So it's not that,
Well, the revenue is reflecting the fact that you've got the rate increases the year before. So the base is going up each year. That 5% rate increase in 20 is built into that number in 21, and then the 6% projected rate increase in 21 is built into the 22.
I guess what I'm asking is, I sort of understand a lot of the rate increases are proposed because consumption is flat, which would lead you to think that the revenue is not necessarily going up as much as the rate increase. But when I look at this table, I'm seeing the revenues going up consummately.
If you take, let's look at like say 21, and you
Yeah.
take that 6%, and you just add 6% times that 771, you add like 1.06, you're going to get to the 811, pretty much. I mean, there's some other revenues that are in there, but it's really just driven, most of it's driven by that rate increase.
What you're not seeing is, if these
other
rate
way.
increases were zero, you're seeing minimal to no growth in the volumetric revenue, even though you're having increases in customers. Unlike, say, our the county's property tax, where whether the rates are changing or not, you're going to see a bump just from growth. They're not seeing that growth bump, and the growth bump is what helps you minimize rate increases. They don't have the benefit of that growth.
So this
Bump
has a
will.
steady, steady use of water. So all you're getting is the 6% rate increase on there. And that is really driven, if you look at the debt service, you
Right.
see the debt service
Thank
growth is
Oh,
really what's
exactly.
driving.
That's where it is going.
That's
right.
the,
This is assuming flat water usage. Again, all these other budgets we have not approved or even discussed. They're just projected, and we're only talking about 20 today. But yeah, as you can see on the farther down the chart, you go up 18 million from 20 to 21, and another 16 million the next year just for debt increase, debt service.
Just the debt
Correct.
service growth. And we're still very tight when you look at those other metrics, like that 40% number, debt service as a percentage of total expenditures, that's really tight. 3.7 down there.
Why does it go up so much between 2023 and 2024? That one goes up 20 million, the other one's 16 on both sides?
Say that one more time, sorry.
Why does the debt service go up so much between 2023 and 2024?
It's all driven by the capital program itself, so it's really a program that says as the
right.
programs come online, we're scheduling the bond sales, and that's what drives. Some of the bonds will be paid off, new bonds will be sold, and it's all driven by your capital program.
I mean, it just seems like, are we looking at the capital program closely enough, Keith?
As I mentioned, we reduced debt service last year by about $50 million
We did from year to year?
to...
Projected debt service or
debt by about $50 million in that first
the new issuance of debt, you mean?
issuance of debt to help start that process. But it's a ship that takes a long time to turn. One of the examples they mentioned, for instance, was the submerged channel intake project. That's about an $86 million project that's been in the CIP for a while. That's recommended for deferral this year out of the 6-year program completely. So it's an example of being able to try to find some savings. On the other hand, we have a consent decree at the Potomac plant that's likely to go up in cost. So we're going to have some puts and takes in the capital program for several years. Some up, some down. But it's going to be a challenge to try to stay within these numbers. And you can see even in 21 and 22, they have an adjustment item here, the $10 million that's shown. That's to be determined savings they would have to find in order to make the numbers work. Now, those numbers were much bigger last year, to be fair to them. So between last year and this year, they've made a lot of progress in the out years of this program.
I mean, it's just, again, you got a large and growing capital program driving constant rate increases even though your work years are flat. It's a challenging situation, and the extent to which you can slow any capital spending would seem like it would be.
I mean, there are some positives. We are coming out towards the end of our SSO consent decree work, which is a $1 billion plus program. I mentioned the Potomac solids consent decree. That's going to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars, but a fair amount of that's already programmed in here. Our below-ground infrastructure, water and sewer pipes, that's something we look at each year in terms of the amount of miles that we want to do, and WCC's actually recommended ratcheting that back a bit, being a little more strategic with what gets replaced. Once again, it's as much art as science, figuring out what the right level is there when you have 5,000 miles of sewer and plus water pipe. If you're looking at a 100-year replacement schedule, you're going to have pipes that need to be replaced before that, and some that maybe can last after that. But you're just going to have. They do have better monitoring in place now than they did 10 years ago, so they feel they can be a little more strategic where they are and find some savings there. But we don't know. In 5 years, we may come to a different conclusion and feel they need to ramp up again. Those are the kinds of decisions we have to look at carefully.
Thank you.
Actually, on that topic, one slide that's not here, and I know this is just a budget hearing and we'll have other time to go into this stuff in great detail. Do you have any data on number and severity of breaks over time, year by year? I'm sure you do. I don't know if you have it available, but...
We don't have it with us today, but we do have that information that we can provide.
What's the trend look like?
Well, last year was a huge water main break year, and our big season is, or the time of the year we have the most is from November to February. Yeah, the winter, and I think we had 1,800 breaks in that short period of time, whereas this year it was substantially lower.
Why do you think that was?
Well, the winter was much milder than it was last year, so we didn't have those dramatic highs and lows in the temperature in the Potomac River that shock our pipes.
Has your ability to predict breaks improved?
Yes, it has. It has. With Patty mentioned the acoustic fiber optic technology, and that has, we invested $21 million in that system and had $42 million worth of savings, and were able to predict or to intervene in 20 breaks before they happened. They were leaks, and we got pings. The acoustic fiber optics gives us the signal, a ping sounding, and it lets us know that we have to go and do something before it actually turns into something like the River Road incident in 2008.
Well, yeah, 20 breaks this year you were able to intervene in before.
Over the last 2 or 3 years, we were able to intervene in
The
20.
1,800 breaks she's talking about are mostly neighborhood lines.
Sure, smaller.
Whereas the acoustic fiber optic monitor is focused on the larger diameter pipe
Right,
where
trunks.
breaks are much more, can have a much more significant impact.
Right.
And that's
But
what,
your mapping is in place now that didn't exist several years ago, correct?
yes, and
The age of the,
we have that information readily available. I just don't remember it off the top of my head. But the other thing is that some of the leak detection technology that we are looking at today is going to help us to detect those leaks in all size pipes. So that's one of the reasons why we feel comfortable backing off the 55 miles of pipes being replaced down to 25 until we actually get stabilized with using that technology.
I just wanted to make this point because I think it's a really valuable initiative. I think you've made a lot of progress in this area. And I remember years ago when I was still in Annapolis and the River Road incident happened, and there were other similar ones that got a lot of attention, but there were similar scale ones, not quite that scale, but in subsequent years. And I remember asking previous commissioners, like, well, how do you know how old your pipes are? How do you know what's their useful life, when you anticipate? And they said, what are you talking about? We just wait for them to break and then we fix them. And that's no longer really your practice.
Right, and we have a very elaborate asset management program that looks at assessment of pipes, and we do forensics after we have pipe breaks to see what the reason is, and all of that data has informed our decision making as to what we need to do next, what we need to try, and predict which ones we need to do first, second, and third. It's not haphazard. It's very deliberate. And the other point I wanted to make while I have the microphone is that much of our capital improvement program is driven by regulatory requirements. And so that's one of the reasons why our debt service is what it is. We really can't control it to that degree. And I forgot the other point I was going to make.
We'll be here.
Okay.
Wes, you ready?
I'm ready. Both of you really took most of the questions that I had, and no, don't be sorry. It's good. I think the point that you were just making is an important one regarding the investments in the capital program and not knowing about the successes that you incur, that you have. And if that is part of the package of information you're going to provide to us, I would like to see that as well, because while the media and our inboxes only alert us about the River Road and other large incidents, the other situations, the preventative measures, which I hope are really driving a lot of these, driving this cost in some respect, those should be shared as well. We never really talk about the cost savings there. I do want to note on page 7 that according to an analysis, WSSC's rate increase over time, while is not the lowest, it's on the edge of the lower third and middle third of the utilities, and I think that's a good statistic. Puts you in perspective with other utilities and shows that you are doing a good job of being mindful to the taxpayer when compared to other utilities. So I applaud that. And the point that my colleague, Councilmember Reamer, talked about earlier regarding the future rate increases, I had questions about that, and I'm satisfied with the responses. And so the last question I have is regarding the usage, and according to this data, per capita usage is down 21.8% since 1996. While I could guess it's a mixture of more multifamily dwellings popping up in the area, technology upgrades, or just individual environmental stewardship, do you have any rationale as to why those numbers continue to plummet? Which is good, by the way, maybe not for you as a business model, but for human existence and regional consumption, it's good.
Well, a big part of it is conservation, but another part is the requirement for low-flow fixtures and toilets. That has contributed greatly to the decrease that we've seen in usage. And I remember probably back in the late 80s, there was a big surge of all of these water audits, and that led to more conservation and more of these installations where people found leaks and a whole bunch of things like that. So I think people are much more aware.
Yeah, could I just add to that? When we were going through the rate structure and had our different options, there were options that did not incorporate conservation ethic to the fullest extent or to any extent. And commissioners felt that it was very important to bake that into the cake, conservation ethic, even though we understand that we get paid by water use. So the less water people use, the less money we have, putting more pressure on all those other things, maintaining the security of the plant, Potomac, and cybersecurity, and all the rest.
It is a altruistic goal of what might not be good for your bottom line is good for the general public, and I absolutely agree.
And some of the new affordability programs that we're going to put in place are going to encourage conservation even more, and doing those audits, and also how to do plumbing repairs is going to be a part of that. So we're going to expect more. But the other thing is that we're really encouraging this culture of innovation, so that not only are we looking into what entrepreneurs can bring to WSSC, but we're looking at what our own employees can come up with, and what inventions can we possibly patent and sell to the market. So that's another way that we're going to offset costs. It's not just going to be from rates, from revenue increases from rates, but it's going to be from other creative sources of revenue.
Thank you.
Terrific. One item I did want to mention in closing, I think, as you could guess, staff was comfortable with the proposal as WCC had transmitted it. We do have one current difference with the Prince George's Council. This budget has gone through their TIEE committee, and they had a recommendation for a lower level of funding for the Inspector General's office than what had been proposed by $500,000. The $500,000 represents an increase that the Inspector General had requested for some additional positions based on his assessment of 100 days in his position, what he needed to move forward, and also separate office space that would be utilized. The Inspector General felt that was also important for his operation. So we do have that difference right now, and WCC can certainly speak to their back and forth they had with Prince George's on this issue, so the committee can hear that firsthand. But that is, if we end up with a difference between our councils, we have to work to resolve that by the time we get to our bi-county meeting on May 9th, so that we can come to a unified recommendation. But I did want to note that right now, that is an item that's a difference between the Prince George's Council and what was in the proposed budget by WSSC.
Ms. Reed, any comment on that?
I was not present for that meeting, so I am going to turn it over to our CFO.
Hi, that's correct. At the TIEE committee meeting, there were questions about the increase. I believe one of the council members referenced the fiscal note on the impact that was projected, and that this was above the fiscal note. However, our Inspector General did talk and make presentation to the commissioners, and the commissioners supported the additional funding, stating that they felt it was necessary to effectively carry out the mission of the Inspector General. I think some information was passed based on the questions that Keith asked, was sent by the Inspector General and was included. Is it in this packet, Keith, or is it just side information?
I have some information and how deep the committee wanted to get into that today. I do have some handouts. I didn't know whether those were necessary or not, but it does include information the Inspector General did in response to the Prince George's Committee's action earlier in April. The other thing I think we forgot to note was the Inspector General had noted that based on his assessment of his office and other IG offices, he did feel that the Inspector General's costs would be offset by revenue, well, not revenue savings, cost savings and/or cost avoidance from the work that they're actually doing. So that's an important piece of that as well. And also he noted the size of the IG office budget compared to the WSSC budget overall.
Right.
And just point out that that's already manifested itself because we did an audit of DC Wssc as the major customer for DC Wssc, resulting in $1.1 million coming back to WSSC. And all studies show that a well-functioning IG office brings in much more money than it spends. I forget what the percentage is, and we will remember fiscal notes.
But the recent, yes, the recent audit saved WSSC $1.1 million
Yeah.
in the cost you would otherwise be paying to DC Wssc.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. I'll just say what I think about this. I think it's terrific that the state legislation sponsored by Senator Kramer passed both county delegations, House and Senate. It was signed into law. I think it's great that you all supported it and that we have a highly skilled, very experienced, top-tier Inspector General hired by you. And this is a basic good government function that I think we need to have functioning well if we're going to have continued support and confidence of ratepayers. And I think it obviously needs to be independent. That was the goal of the legislation. It needs to be funded. It needs to be set up that way in terms of where it's housed, and it needs to be funded adequately. And this is no time in the first year after you pass legislation like this and create the office to then starve it. And if it is not successful, people will be pointing fingers at it and saying, oh, look, this isn't successful because we didn't give it the funding that it really needs to succeed. So to me, I've spoken to Chair Turner in Prince George, and I've spoken to the Inspector General. I don't really agree with that position. I'm happy with the proposed budget for the IG office. Colleagues?
I agree. So this is a recommended budget from WSSC for this level of funding, or is it from the IG directly?
Well, the base budget included the IG office.
Right.
The IG had then asked last fall for an increase in that based on his assessment, having been there for, I guess, 100 days at that point. And that included the 2 additional positions in the rental space. The cost was $500,000 to be offset. And actually, the fiscal plan here assumes that those dollars are offset. So if for some reason you were to remove that, we would also have to remove the assumed savings. So you would not see a change in the rate you would have to charge customers. So it is baked into the proposed budget now, as requested by the IG.
Well, I think we should support it, and thanks for your comments on that.
One thing I would like to add is that the amount that Commissioner Dennis referenced that the IG saved this year, that office, before it was the IG's office, also saved similar amounts or more. So just so we have all the information.
Yeah, the internal audit function, which they've had for a number of years, was the IG and the internal audit were merged into one unit when the IG office was created. So you have both the financial audit side and performance audit side, and you have the waste, fraud, and abuse piece. That's the more traditional side of the IG.
Now both will be under the IG?
Yeah, they're combined into one organizational unit.
With a little additional independence.
So,
and hopefully more savings in the future. Yeah.
So you no longer will have an internal audit. You'll have to go to the IG for your internal audit?
Well, the internal audit function is within the IG unit. I guess WSC can speak to how the day-to-day function of that is. But the internal audit function is one it is a little different because you are doing regular financial reviews.
Yeah, I mean, the internal audit function is sort of part of the executive management of an organization, and it's one where the executive leadership regularly is turning to, please look at this and please look at that, right? So I'm a little worried about putting them together because you could get a culture where there's a little tension between the two, and then you end up maybe not asking for as much investigation through your audit function as you would have.
Yeah, that is, and by the way, for the record, Joe Beach, Deputy General Manager for Administration, that will be an issue because the Inspector General will have that internal audit function. But as you mentioned, from time to time, we like to consult with the Internal Audit Office when we're setting up a program or reviewing our internal controls to make sure they're sound. My understanding with the current IG is they would stand apart from that process because they don't want to be part of establishing those controls because then subsequently they would have some conflict in reviewing it.
Yeah. So
we will have to look for some other resources to sort of get that independent consultation on our, especially on our internal controls and segregation of duties.
And did you have a position that was your internal audit, or several positions, or what was your structure?
We would consult with the Internal Audit Office before this on those sort of issues. Now we're actually working on bridging a contract with Montgomery County and your Internal Audit Office to sort of provide that
Internal audit function.
provide that consultation. Yeah.
So you had one position previously in Internal Audit Office?
No, 8 positions.
You had 8 positions?
Yes.
And now what do you, they're all moved to the IG?
Yes.
And the IG, so the IG has 8 positions now?
That was the internal audit staff, yeah. Plus the 2 that are being requested.
Plus 2 more that are being requested, but yet you're having to go outside for your internal audit functionality for good reason?
Well, yes, for that consultation, we will now.
So,
Now, and there is, I mean, in fact, I was at a conference, I was at a finance officers conference on Friday, and the view of some in the industry is that it should not be in that sort of executive management, within the executive management function.
Okay.
Others that believe it should be, in this case, either a commission or legislative, like OLO would be for the county government. And the external audit contract, in fact, is held by the county council and not the executive. So there are different schools of thought on it.
Okay.
But regardless of that, we do from time to time like to get sort of an independent view on our existing arrangements and when we're changing management of programs to make sure we have the appropriate segregation of duties.
okay. Something to keep an eye on. Thanks.
Okay.
And that's all I have for the WSC budget. Just, I guess before the committee today is the WSC's proposed budget, the system development charge resolution, and you've already, I think, indicated your support for the additional IG funding, so that's within the WSC proposed budget.
Right. Well, I support the proposed budget.
What I'm hearing is unanimity from the committee on those 3 things.
Yes? Okay. Well, thank you all for your hard work and your attentiveness to keeping our water safe and our sewer working. Nothing's more fundamental to a high-functioning society. So anyway, thanks very much for giving us one of the highest functioning water utilities in the country. We're very proud of your first 100 years, and we're looking forward to the next 100 years.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And also wanted to say that our chair, who is from Montgomery County, would have been here today, but she's traveling, Eloise.
Cool.
Thank you.
Wish her our best. Thank you.
Announcement, thank you.
Hard to know. This is our Inspector General. Oh, Mr. Elkin. So great to meet you. You're standing over here. Okay. Should have waved at us or something. That's right. I hope we didn't say anything bad. Okay. Now we know you're watching us.
It wasn't an administrative law judge ruled a discriminatory thing.
I thought the judge, well, I think the PSC acted upon the judge's
Yeah, well,
opinion.
hearings, whatever it was called, administrative law judge. right.
The judge was sort of the first step,
Yeah,
the critical step.
ALJ, but it went to the full PSC.
Yeah, that's true.
Discussed the
The next item on the agenda...
Thanks for bearing with us, DEP community.
The next item on the agenda is the Department of Environmental Protection, and we've actually got this divided up, as we typically do each year, between two elements. We have the General Fund and the Water Quality Protection Fund, which we'll discuss now, and then the Solid Waste, Division of Solid Waste Services immediately after this. So I think we have some folks
Director
in
Ortiz,
DEP
you want to bring your
join
team
us.
up? You're not so lucky. Frank, hey, Stan. Please?
Yeah, let me give just a few overall points, and then we can have DEP weigh in. The general fund budget, which we can talk about first, is proposed at $3.13 million. So this is a small department from a general fund side of things. That's an increase of $192,950, or 13.3%. However, before fixating on that 13.3%, I did want to note that the budget includes the movement of the Conservation Corps contract, which would shift from the Department of Health and Human Services to DEP, and a portion of it would go in the general fund, and a portion of it would go in the Water Quality Protection Fund. So taking that element out, the rest of the DEP budget is going up only really for compensation, benefits, and some other technical adjustments. And we can certainly talk about some of the elements within the general fund, but from a budget standpoint, we're not seeing a whole lot of change this year, apart from that Conservation Corps shift on the general fund side. Now, the general fund does have a fairly broad mandate, and I talk about it in the packet. You have, and I've noted this on page 4 of the packet, you have a water and wastewater group that works closely with Wssc and on water and sewer plan issues. You also have a code enforcement section that deals with the elements of the code that they enforce, including noise, air quality issues, illegal dumping, things like that. And then you also have the Office of Sustainability, which deals with climate change, forest conservation, and a number of other elements within that. So it's got a fairly broad mandate. A lot of this is outward focused, though, and focusing on improving these conditions in the community as a whole, whereas compared to, and I constantly make this comparison to the Office of Sustainability within the Department of General Services, which is focusing on county government operations and internal improvements we make to improve our own footprint with what we directly control. So this is a fairly small budget and staffing operation on the general fund side, although it has a pretty broad mandate. But with that, why don't we hear from DEP, allow them to provide some opening thoughts.
Welcome.
Great to be here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's good to see you all. I also want to express my gratitude to the support for Greenfest, which wrapped up yesterday's beautiful day and a historic turnout. And also want to thank our sister agencies and partners in the audience for all of their support as well. We're really pleased to be here today, and we appreciate the partnership with OMB and being here today and the work of Mr. Levchenko. So on the general fund piece, just a little bit more on the Conservation Corps, really important program, a lot of interest in it moving over to us. We think it's a good fit. In the first year, and I think we might have mentioned this the last time we spoke, we're going to continue to, for a year, just keep the operation as it has been going, to monitor and learn a little bit more about the ins and outs and how it works. And in the second year, we plan to integrate it and align it more closely with the work of Mr. Dawson's group in the Watershed Restoration Division. So I think everybody knows everybody, but Frank Dawson heads our Watershed Restoration group, and Stan Edwards heads our Policy and Compliance group.
Welcome.
And I can go on, Mr. Chairman, but I know we have a lot to cover, a lot of different funds, so I'll behave myself.
Thank
I
you.
think the general fund piece actually, I don't think either of these will necessarily take a long time to talk about today. But on the general fund side, the couple of pieces that I think the committee is pretty aware of, because we did have some briefings recently, including a climate change briefing just a few weeks ago. And there's a lot of interest in the committee in making sure that we had sufficient resources going forward to fund the additional analytical and organizational work that's needed to tell us where we're going next. And we did receive some late word late last week that the executive branch had identified some additional FY19 resources that could go towards this effort. And then we also heard from Mr. Reamer interested in identifying FY20 resources that could perhaps go on the reconciliation list to make sure that we had sufficient resources going into FY20 and during FY20. And then the one other element I'll note there is a related position that's been held vacant for the last couple of years that is a climate change related position in the Office of Sustainability that staff suggests restoring to the degree we don't delay hiring the position any further. It still takes several months to fill these positions, but staff does suggest adding the resources to not unnecessarily delay it going forward. And that position could also be a resource towards this process. And certainly DEP could look at the description of that position and tailor it now based on where things stand now, and maybe it will be adjusted a little bit from how it was created a couple of years ago. But that is also a ready resource that could be made available for this effort. But I think that's really the focus on the general fund side today in terms of the issues that were important to the committee and what staff has identified as timely going forward now. There are a lot of other things going in this budget that are more status, and they're in the packet if the committee wants to get into those, but I don't know if we need to at this point. I suggest we focus on that climate change funding piece and see if the committee can come to some concurrence on that.
I agree. Okay, any discussion on the water quality protection charge?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, that would be I would suggest we
you're
take
gonna
that
cover
up next.
Okay, fine.
After we deal with the general fund.
Great.
So I have a comment just about general here. I know that Conservation Corps, clearly, according to this budget, will move into your portfolio, and I'm not sure if there are any similar organizations that currently contract with and work under DEP, but just want to provide some guidance and or caution in terms of the work that Conservation Corps does clearly is environmental protection, but at its core, it is a positive youth development organization, and want to make sure that as you help manage that program, you're aware of how it functions within that social service agency space.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman. Very mindful of that, in that the primary goal of the program is to develop youth and help them contribute to the workforce and be prosperous adults. So we're aware of the division between personal development, professional development, and then the work out in the field in the hours that are required for each of those functions. So I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments before we get into the Councilmember Reamer's proposal? Great.
Okay, thank you. I know my colleagues are working hard on a number of climate change initiatives. We're all doing everything we can, and we have had the benefit of the Climate Emergency Task Force and the Mobilization Group. And we're at this point, I think, where there's so many competing ideas and proposals, we need to be able to figure out better how to prioritize what we're doing. So I know a lot of the environmental groups and all of us have been looking at how can we better assess the cost effectiveness of different steps. And so I had proposed, I've been working on a proposal for some time with the Sierra Club, particularly an evaluation mechanism and consulting, and I was glad to hear that the executive branch has identified some resources to put towards a much more refined evaluation of next steps. And so my focus had been on buildings particularly, and how we can really expand what we're doing, but generally, I was looking for funding to support the technical programmatic work group and outreach elements of our carbon emission reductions plan, as well as funding separately to support a hazard and vulnerability assessment and strategies for adaptation to climate change. So while I have been working towards an $800,000 recommendation with the $400,000 that you've identified, I think I'd like to suggest to my colleagues that we could seek to add, if they are interested, another $400,000 so that the overall amount is the same, recognizing the funds you've already been able to identify, and we can do that in 2 tranches of $200,000. Again, we're focusing here on buildings and transportation and clean energy and other measures to reduce carbon emissions, and some technical evaluation to figure out what the most efficient measures are, as well as adaptation. So there's a memo that I have circulated that kind of outlines this a little bit further.
Thank you, council member. I'll just share my views on this. DEP's been a skinny, lean and mean agency for a long time, and it still is. And you have a relatively small budget given the importance of your charge, and a number of lapsed positions as well. And so I am definitely a supporter of getting additional funds into DEP, especially given the urgency of addressing the climate emergency that we have acknowledged, and the commitment we've made as a council, and the complexity of assessing all the recommendations coming from the work group and other ones that we'll undoubtedly think of and identify in the future. My only 2 friendly amendments to this proposal, which I support conceptually, would be one, that we make our language more agnostic on how much is consultants versus staff, because I believe there's certainly more we need our DEP staff to do, and they're already doing in this area, and I think it's great that ACAO Hochberg is very focused on a multi-departmental approach to climate change and to helping all the departments pull in the right direction. But I think it's bad practice just to telegraph we're going to spend a certain amount on consultants, because then you invite all the bidders to spend, Mr. Dice is nodding, so I know I'm not far afield here, to come in $1 less than exactly the amount that you've allocated for quote-unquote consultants. So I think we ought to be agnostic on this. Will be work will be done by some combination of staff and consultants, and it'll be up to the director and the procurement office to put together a sensible proposal. And in that same vein, I'm fine on breaking into tranches. I think that makes sense. I wouldn't necessarily do 1 tranche for buildings and transportation, 1 tranche for adaptation. I'd say all those 3 things are important to consider, and then leave it to the staff what the exact breakdown is, because I don't think we know enough right now to say how much it costs to properly address adaptation versus buildings versus transportation, and I have confidence the department can figure that out. Does that make sense? Okay. Friendly amendment?
So, sure. So retaining 2 tranches at 200,
sure.
200 each, but being a little more general, saying that our objective is to strengthen the department's efforts to evaluate transportation, clean energy, and other measures to reduce carbon emissions, as well as supporting the technical programmatic work group and outreach elements of a plan to reduce carbon emissions, hazard and vulnerability assessment. If you can do that if you can recruit the people to do that internally, awesome. That's a sustaining resource. So is that clear enough?
Yeah, and I think I can work with the department to try to find as much clarity as we can on that between now and the council on this. But it's clear you want the $400,000 in the 2 tranches on the reconciliation list. We'll try to broaden that language a little bit. We'll work with committee members on that language.
Yeah, maybe we can do. You have the memo, or I'll make sure you have it, and then you guys can talk, and you'll let us know what you recommend to full council, how that could be allocated. Okay, Good.
I think that's terrific, and just in terms of timeline, I think it's important that we say here that we're looking for, I'd like to see as many recommendations as we can within a year, and if the whole thing takes a year or two, that's one thing. Recommendations 5 years from now, I think, don't really reflect the urgency of the situation that we're looking to address here. So I really hope we can write the RFP and the scope of work in a way that we get some recommendations,
Well, I know
even on an iterative basis, maybe.
the FY19 dollars that were noted by executive staff also indicated an interest in working with the Council of Governments.
Yep.
And through that process, so they have the benefit of consultants available on a much quicker basis.
Right.
And if we were to go out on our own.
My understanding is they're ready to go, yeah.
And they also have in-house expertise.
Exactly.
And of course, there's a regional element to it that could be very useful.
Right. So I think there'd be a lot of built-in efficiencies. Okay.
And was the committee also
3-0?
supportive?
Great.
Committee also supportive of the resources for that lapsed position?
Yes.
So that brings us to the Water Quality Protection Fund side of the budget.
Can I actually ask a question about that? So for a number of years, the T&E committee recommended adding positions into this Office of Sustainability. Is that the same place where those positions, they just weren't filled by OMB, his repeated
actually,
savings plans?
The council had moved forward with a pretty significant initiative about 3 years ago, and there were, I believe, initially 6 positions, and I think it got whittled down to 4. Those were approved. 3 of them, I believe, were filled eventually. This one was the one that was not. So it does have a history of being initiated at the council, actually,
Okay.
but not filled. And to be fair, there were savings plans during that time, and,
Yeah.
and DEP had to find resources, and vacant positions are an area where departments
Oh, yeah,
have to look.
that's natural. Okay. Just wanted to be clear if I thought that was the history. I just wanted to, thanks.
For the Water Quality Protection Fund, we have actually a much larger budget. I mentioned the small budget on the general fund side. It's a much larger budget on this side. About $28.9 million is proposed. That's a $913,000 increase, which is about 3.3%. Once again, though, you take the Conservation Corps piece out that would be included here, and you have about a 2.2% increase, which is relatively small in this budget over time. This budget has seen some significant increases in the last decade as it's taken on additional responsibilities both internally and also to meet its expanded MS4 permit requirements beginning in 2010. But this time around, we're seeing much more marginal changes. As I've noted on the front of the packet, a lot of these adjustments beyond the Conservation Corps are technical adjustments, compensation adjustments, annualization of personnel costs. There's an increase in the allocation to the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, our Planning Board and Parks Department. They have an element of this that they've been getting for a number of years for their water quality efforts, and so they had requested an increase in this, and they're seeing about a 2.4% increase in this recommended budget. And then there is an additional accountant position recommended and a part-time planning tech position. Once again, these are relatively small in this large budget. The equivalent residential unit, which is the base that the rates that folks pay as seen on their property tax bill are based, that's recommended to not change for this year. So these marginal increases have also made possible the fact that we're not seeing an increase in this charge. Now, there are projected increases in the out years if one looks at the fiscal plan that I've included in the packet as we go forward. But at least for this year, we're not seeing an increase. We may in future years. It may depend a lot on the MS4 permit that ultimately is approved going forward and what the elements are in that. As well as what other initiatives may occur that do get added to this between now and next year and the year after that. But that's basically what we're seeing on this side. The one new element I think I'd like DEP to speak to is the Anacostia trash trap, where they are recommending to reallocate some resources from their inspection and maintenance category here, which is one of their larger line items in this budget, to that new item to address another MS4 permit priority, which is trash in stream valleys. And so this is the one sort of new initiative that was sort of identified in this budget this year.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Concerning the trash traps, we're looking at using CBT grants, trying to attract a nonprofit that would end up designing, installing, and maintaining it. We're hoping that they would use a local small engineering firm, looking at the idea of having a band-along trash trap, and I'm not an expert on trash traps, looking at a cost of about $250,000, plus $50,000 for maintenance. I think we had a discussion before how it's basically located across the body of water, collects the trash, and after major storms greater than an inch, it has to be maintained. And it's Prince George's County. They used a similar approach through Chesapeake Bay Trust. There are a number of other trash traps in the Anacostia, and we have a TMDL for trash, and we're looking for more opportunities to contribute to that effort.
Sounds high-tech. Just kidding.
Yeah, I did not really have any other issues to really raise. There's some information in the packet that staff's happy to go over if the committee wants to, or if DEP has anything else they want to add for the moment. But staff is comfortable with the recommendations as proposed and with the Water Quality Protection Charge ERU rate, which we also set by resolution each year at the rate recommended by the executive, which is unchanged from 19.
Mr. Chairman, I would only add, not much has changed since we had the hearing just on water several weeks ago, other than that time has passed. So we're closer to hearing back from MDE on what the disposition of our permit's going to be. I've had a few offline conversations with Secretary Grumbles. It sounds like there's going to be more of a focus on nutrients, and we talked about that, Councilman Glass. But everything we're hearing is that things are on a timeline, and at that time, we'll be able to make a bigger decision about the suite of projects that have been on pause, and particularly some of the ones that have had high resident and community engagement. In the interim, though, we've been getting a lot of questions about some of those projects. We've been very responsive. I'll be going out to some of the communities in the next few weeks just to give them an update on the status, so they feel the love and know that it's on the radar as we figure it out. I also want to emphasize that even though that portion is on hold, we do have about 10 projects that are still underway now, whether in design, construction, or structural rebuilding on the maintenance side. So we're definitely doing work. We're definitely out in the community. We're definitely breaking ground, even though we're still a little bit of a holding pattern on the DBM side.
Terrific. But no alarm bells, no reason that you think we'll need a more ambitious program at this stage, based on your conversations with Secretary Grumbles?
Yeah,
right?
no alarm bells.
Great. Okay.
I do suggest we go slightly out of order, since we have the folks at the table that can also speak to items 5 and 6. This is the stormwater management and storm drain CIP. And the storm drain piece are really technical changes, which I don't think we need to focus a lot on. There are a couple of amendments on the stormwater side, which the folks can speak to here. And I think we can get to that very quickly and then go back to solid waste. So for, as I mentioned, for the storm drain program, there are 2 projects that came over from the executive as amendments, outfall repair and storm drain general, but they're purely to revise the funding allocations in each project based on the Maryland Department of the Environment's loan eligibility rules. Basically, the loan program does not allow all of your planning and design costs to be covered by the loan. So we have to revert some of that back to Water Quality Protection Fund current revenue. So that's what's reflected in the executive's amendments for those 2 projects, and staff concurs with that. On the stormwater side, there are 2 projects with amendments. The miscellaneous stream valley improvements and the stormwater management retrofit schools project. And the write-up on those begins on page 3 of the packet. The miscellaneous Stream Valley Improvements Project has a few elements to it. First, the amended project is in alignment with the council's actions last July. You may recall we had a significant debate last spring over the county stormwater management CIP, and in fact had a council action followed by an executive veto, followed by further negotiations and final action by the council in July. So the approved CIP as published, in fact, does not incorporate those later actions in July. So the projects, both amended and updated today, reflect those July actions where needed. So that's sort of one thing across the board for all of these projects. But in addition, this miscellaneous Stream Valley Improvements Project also includes a new phase of the Glenstone water or stream restoration project on that site. It's a phase 3 project. They've already had 2 phases, one of which is phase 2 is ongoing, with $1.43 million in FY20, and it's part of a partnership with the Glenstone property to restore a substantial amount of impervious surface area on that site. And staff's noted here the pretty significant, I don't know if cost savings is the right word, but certainly cost-effective credits we get through this particular project, through the partnership. And staff is supportive of that, adding that additional phase in this project.
What makes it so cost-effective?
Well, partly because they're contributing a portion of the project. The county is only paying up to 50% of the project cost, as I noted here, and up to $250 per linear foot. So across all 3 of these phases of work, we're getting 144.4 impervious surface acre credits under our next MS4 permit, or most of this under the next permit, at a cost of $3.6 million, which comes out to about $25,000 a credit. And we're seeing significantly higher cost per credit for other types of work we're doing in this area. So just comparatively, it's a fairly low cost per credit.
Great.
Also, this project has historically had a partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers, and there's some planning work added in FY20 to begin a new phase of work, and that's recommended at $350,000, and staff concurs with that as well. And then the last change is actually an adjustment to reflect actual project costs based on actual construction bids affecting FY18 expenditures, and staff concurs with that as well.
Terrific. I think we're good.
The other project is the Stormwater Management Retrofit Schools project. Once again, it's been put in alignment with the approved CIP from last July. The amendment is only a technical adjustment, switching some state aid and water quality protection bond funding between FY19 and FY18. Once again, no substantive change in the scope of the project, and staff concurs with that amendment. And as you heard, we're still waiting on where things are moving with the Design, Build, Maintain project. The projects were included in the executive's amendment transmittal just to show that they have been aligned with the action from last July, but no other substantive changes to them. So they're in here for informational purposes, but don't require council action today.
Right.
Or council review today.
Mr. Ortiz, when do you think we'll have a decision on the DBM?
What's in our control is responding to MDE's response to us. So we're hearing June. There's not necessarily a great record of sticking to timetables when it comes to this stuff, but my pledge is that we'll be as responsive as possible once we get the information from MDE.
Okay.
We'd like to, on behalf of the department, we concur with all of Mr. Levchenko's concurrences.
I concur with them as well. I think my colleagues, judging by their, yes, we good, Mr. Levchenko, 3-0?
Yeah, that's it for items
Okay.
5 and 6.
Beautiful. Okay. I think you might be
So now we need to go back to solid waste.
solid waste. Right. Thank you, Stan. Thank you, Frank. Sure.
Thanks,
Welcome, Mr. Weiner. Welcome, Ms. Cow. Okay, take it away.
All right. The solid waste budget is actually made up of two distinct funds, the solid waste collection fund and the solid waste disposal funds that are both self-supporting. So any increases or decreases in these funds do not impact the county's general affordability issues with regard to the general fund. So it's just important to keep that in mind. I've noted each fund separately. I've tried to provide a summary on the first page of the packet. The solid waste collection fund budget is up 3.7%. I've noted it's up primarily due to increases in refuse collection contracts, although the number is a lot smaller than the increase we saw last year, which is built into the number this year as well. So it's a little bit misleading, but we're seeing a continuation of those. As the new contracts are negotiated, we're seeing increases based from what the contracts were 5 to 7 years ago. On the disposal side, the budget's up 6.9%, and I've noted the largest increases here. Equipment replacement at the recycling center, inflationary increases at the resource recovery facility, and other recycling center operating costs, out-of-county hauling rates, and general tonnage increases that we're seeing are filtering across some of these different costs, and also some increased support for moving forward with the food waste composting program. So those are some of the big elements there. In terms of charges, we are seeing some significant increases in the single-family side, depending on the services provided, 4 to 12% increases. And we can talk about the reason for that. Much of it is the increase in the refuse and recycling contract costs that I just mentioned. On the multifamily side, we're not seeing those kinds of increases. Once again, they are not getting collection from us, so those costs wouldn't filter through that. And the transfer station tipping fees are recommended to be kept at FY19 levels, so those are not changing either. We do have several sort of issues I've noted here. We had a briefing on solid waste issues late last month, and we talked about the solid waste master planning effort, among several other big initiatives. So that's certainly a significant all-encompassing effort that could drive a number of issues going forward, but it's still in process. Electric sales revenue at the resource recovery facility, that was an issue in play at the state legislative session. During discussion of the renewable portfolio standard, there was also a lot of debate about whether waste to energy should remain as a Tier 1 designated energy. As a Tier 1 energy, it can generate more revenue for the sale of renewable energy credits to companies looking to build their clean energy portfolio. The budget before you today does not assume those credits would be available because it felt that there was a risk that that legislation would pass, and it wanted to be on the more conservative side. But the fact that that particular portion of the legislation did not pass means we will be seeing an increase in revenue in the disposal fund for the resource recovery facility, which equates to a reduced cost for that program, essentially. It offsets some of the costs.
So what happens?
Well, staff's recommending that we've got a lot of issues in the fund moving forward, especially with the master planning effort. A lot of the recommendations from that effort will involve increased costs to recycle more items, to pursue more source reduction initiatives. So staff is suggesting that that money should be included in the fund. I would not suggest necessarily lowering rates this year to offset that, since we are likely to see the need for increased expenditures in the near future. And that could just exacerbate the rate increases needed in future years. So staff, and I get to that later, but we can certainly deal with that now. Staff suggests that the revenue impact from that be absorbed in the disposal fund and fund balance.
Right, okay.
And then the other item I mentioned is funding for nonprofits within the solid waste fund. This is an issue that had come up a few years ago The Solid Waste Disposal Fund includes some support for the nonprofit A Wider Circle, and the committee had discussed this a couple of years ago about the appropriateness of including this kind of support in the solid waste fund. The nexus in this case is that this nonprofit essentially diverts furniture and other household equipment and supplies that would otherwise be included in the disposal system, and so it's providing that solid waste benefit. Staff felt that because the nonprofit is primarily focused, has a human services mission and not so much a solid waste reduction mission, that this support would best be provided either in the HHS budget or the Housing and Community Affairs budget or some other more appropriate human services related area, and not in the solid waste budget. And also there is a concern that we have a number of other entities in the county that provide or have a similar outcome in that they also are a way for folks to divert materials that would otherwise perhaps go into the disposal system to being reused or repurposed. And staff felt that, once again, those are probably best suited to be dealt with based on their primary mission and not a benefit from that mission. So staff's suggestion is that the committee recommend that those funds be identified or be supported elsewhere in the budget.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
So from a practical standpoint, because we're talking about potentially different funds, it gets a little more complicated. Because we're talking about the solid waste disposal fund, if it were to move, for instance, to the general fund, then the typical practice for committees making recommendations that increase the general fund is that they would have to go on the reconciliation list. Now, in this case, we're not quite sure where they would go, and staff can certainly work with my colleagues to determine what is an appropriate place for these funds to be considered. But if it's not the solid waste fund and it's not some other special fund, then it would be the general fund. And then you get into the issue of the reconciliation list. So that's sort of the conundrum we're in. We have it right now funded in the proposed budget, and I think the committee is generally supportive of the funding itself, just not necessarily in the solid waste fund. So that's sort of where we sort of have this issue of what comes first. Do we figure out where it goes first, or do we don't want to lose it? Right. Do we put it on the reconciliation list, or do we leave it in the solid waste fund for now until we find a place for it?
I agree. You might want to talk to the staff for the HHS committee and any other candidates and let us know what our options might be.
Mm-hmm. The Fed committee too, I mean, it could go in the HIF.
Right, there's a lot of different places. And in fact, this nonprofit does receive some funding from elsewhere in the operating budget.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's funding in the HIF, I know. So that's also an option. Did you?
Trevor Lowe about OMB. Yeah, that's what I just wanted to clarify, that there is $145,000 provided to Wider Circle through the community grants, and then also the $225,000 through the HIF. So just wanted to clarify that.
Can I just say, if I thought that the furniture that was going to the Wider Circle was, securing would otherwise end up in the landfill, I'd be more supportive of this stream of funding, but it shouldn't be going into the landfill. I mean, or it shouldn't be disposed of. It's supposed to be good furniture, and you shouldn't be you don't donate trash for people to live with. You're donating better items. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that these items necessarily are being prevented from going into the waste stream.
Right, and I think you do run into the precedent issue too. We have a lot of other worthy organizations that also accept goods, household goods, clothing, other things that also could potentially find their way into the waste stream, depending on their quality, as you mentioned. But that's not really the primary focus of these programs. The programs are intended to help needy populations. That's their focus. And I think while
not
there
trying
could
to
be a
waste
side
stream
benefit.
diversion grant program, right?
I think certainly, and DEP partners with nonprofits at its transfer station to accept, items that people can drop off while they're there at a one-stop shop, so they can throw out some stuff and put other stuff in the designated areas where nonprofits can get them. But from staff's perspective, it doesn't necessarily mean that the funding in the solid waste fund should go to that purpose
I
necessarily.
think we agree.
Can I go back to a different item? I just wanted to get an update on the food scraps, the food waste organics recycling. I see you've got a $489,000 increase, and there's a very brief summary, but can you just talk a bit more about that?
Sure.
Good afternoon, Willie Weiner. Yes, we are asking for an increase of $489,000 to fund the startup of a food waste program. These monies will be used for outreach, education, technical assistance of businesses and residents for our potential curbside program that will be coming probably in a year or so. The rest of the money.
You think the curbside program will be coming in a year? Is that a pilot? Is that just a small area of the county? Or?
Yes, it's one of the recommendations of the master plan that is being in progress. And we are sure that to make a difference with the food waste collection and diversion, we will need to have a curbside program sometime in the future.
Do you have a facility will you have a facility in a year to use to process
Well,
that level of?
What we're doing right now is we are securing capacity with an existing facility in Prince George's County. And we will be in the process to secure capacity in other facilities in the area.
Okay. Okay. So you're finding the capacity.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, if we're going to make a difference in food waste, we will have to build in the future. We will have to build our own facility.
Okay.
We are targeting with our diversion efforts. We will be targeting somewhere between 70,000 to 110,000 tons of food waste that is being generated in Montgomery County. And there is no facility in the areas that can process that type of tonnage. So we will need our own facility.
We should use our own facility. I mean, we should embrace the idea that we are responsible for our own waste and we handle it here in Montgomery County. And so that'll be a challenging conversation, but Director Ortiz, I know you can do it.
Yes.
Thank you for the vote of confidence. I expect you to say that in 3 years. We come back with the plan. But yeah, as Mr. Weiner said,
Give you 2 weeks.
This budget is really a down payment on going in the right direction.
Right.
We have a lot of unanswered questions. There are a lot of big generators. We want to start introducing curbside. And then we need to find a site, and of course that's tied in with the future of the MRF. We talked about this a month or so ago, but I appreciate the interest and the support from the committee, and we're committed to keep communication open and continue to move the county forward in solid waste.
Much more to come on this topic. Okay, I think we're good, colleagues. Mr. Lubchenco?
Yeah, I think it is important to emphasize, as Mr. Ortiz just mentioned, the recycling center itself is in need of substantial upgrade and replacement. And you're seeing a down payment on that in this budget. But we're going to likely see an amendment to the CIP to move forward with a comprehensive replacement project. That's going to be, and that itself, the scope of that project needs to be determined partly through this master planning process to understand what we are looking to recycle or may be recycling in the near future, and how to build what that new facility should be built to do. So That's going to be a major element, and we are seeing significant increases in this budget to start that process. But we'll be seeing a lot more over the next year.
There's a chance we could have a new location for our resource recovery facility and not have it be right at the end of the metro anymore?
Yes, there is a chance. We're looking at all the options. Director Dice is here, of course, and working with General Services to compare 3 options. One is upgrades at the existing facility, which is a very small footprint, but it's got some advantages. A leased facility, the benefit of that is that there's a building in place and we can just move the equipment in while we continue the existing operation. Or the third is to build a new facility, build a suit, custom for sort of the next generation, mindful of food waste and some of these other programs. We're not there yet. We've done a pretty substantial preliminary study of some of the options, but we have more work to do. But they're all options on the table at this time.
I'm just really excited to hear that there's even the chance that we could relocate out of that area at Shady Grove and further open up land there. I've always thought it was so unfortunate. It was just historical, the legacy. It had to do with the train tracks, I think, substantially. But the fact that we have, a transfer station at a metro stop it's in some ways it's kind of tragic. And you look at the other counties in the region, and they've got bustling downtowns with major employers moving in, to their metro stops. And so to be able to really transform that, and that's the area that's really most proximate to this metro station, right? It's kind of like the closest land in a lot of ways, or at least it's a big share of it. So I think it'd be worth it to get out of that location, and if it costs a little bit more money, we ought to do that too. It's a long-term kind of game changer, I think, for the county in a lot of ways. So I'll be looking forward to hearing more about it. I just want to encourage you in that direction, and if there are ever points where you're at question, like, what's the cost benefit here? What do people think? I would love to have you come back and talk to us about it.
And just to clarify, of course, the transfer station was a separate beast from the recycling center. The recycling center is on the very southern edge of that site. The transfer station has all sorts of other elements to it, including the rail to the resource recovery facility.
Right.
So that would be a very different exercise to relocate all of those services at that site.
Okay, we're just talking about the transfer station. We're not talking about everything else.
The southern edge, which is admittedly closest to the metro center, but a relatively small plot of land that the recycling center and the newer paper sorting facility or the paper baling facility next door is on.
I see. Yeah. So it's just a slice.
It's a slice of it, yeah.
Okay. Well, piece by piece.
More to come. Thank you.
Okay.
And the committee have any questions about the solid waste charges themselves, or the rate increase, the charge increases that are assumed? There's a chart on the end of the memo. Let me bring that up.
Mr. Weiner, do you want to comment on your thoughts on the trend in these charges in the future, especially for single family?
Yes. What we work is with the mass balance, and we trend all these charges and try to smooth the trend moving forward. So you're seeing last year you've seen a big increase, not so much this year, but that's related to the increases in the collection for the most part.
Right.
Collection contracts that the last set of contracts had been awarded 7 to 9 years ago, and
right.
once they got rebid, of course the costs went up tremendously.
Right. I'd encourage you, as part of the solid waste master plan, you'll have adequate time to really think about the direction going forward, and I imagine you'd want to look at the costs and benefits potentially of insourcing this work too, because certainly I understand DC and Baltimore both still do this work with municipal workers, and they're probably not doing it to waste money. It's a core government function. It's not highly specialized, and it's not temporary. and it might be better done by contractors, and it might be better done by county employees. I don't have a view on that, but I'd encourage you to look at that option as well.
Sure, we do.
And that is something the Office of Legislative Oversight is looking at in terms of collection practices for the county as a whole. And one of the elements is that very issue you mentioned, the current contracting process versus in-house, and some of the elements associated with going in either direction there. So it is something you'll hear more about from our Office of Legislative Oversight in the near future.
Great. Okay.
I didn't have anything else to add regarding the solid waste budget unless there are
We're in good shape on this proposed budget, colleagues. 3-0, great. Thank you all for your good work. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Good to see you all.
Okay. Mr. Dice, you've lost your whole afternoon. You want to join us? Good, I hope so.
Our last budget to deal with is the FY20 operating budget for the utilities non-departmental account.
Right.
We'll let folks cycle in and out here. All right, see you later.
Okay. Mr. Levchenko, please.
All right, so before you today, you have staff from the executive branch who can speak to county government-related utility costs, and in particular the utilities NDA. We also do have some folks from the outside agencies here. If you have broader questions regarding their energy procurement issues, or in some cases energy conservation or clean energy programs. But today we're focusing on the appropriation that the county does, or the council does, for its non-departmental account, which is the general fund tax-supported portion of the utility costs. Special funds pay their costs directly through those special funds to recapture those or keep those costs within those funds. The FY20 budget for the utilities NDA is proposed at $25,977,000. It's actually a decrease of about $258,000, or 1% from the FY19 approved budget. I've noted in the packet the major changes, which are generally what you have in this budget is you have new facilities or renovated facilities coming online, and the impact that has on costs. And often, when you have increased square footage, you tend to have increased costs. But even with renovated facilities, you may have increased costs as well, even though those facilities may be more efficient. But countervailing that, you do have energy efficiency savings in many cases from the proactive work that the executive branch is doing, either with these renovated facilities or just special projects across the county government. And you also have some of the clean energy projects that we talked about a few weeks ago in the climate change discussion, and some of the beneficial impacts that has in terms of the costs the county experiences. You can also have other issues like weather. Weather can drive a lot of this cost as well. If you have a severe winter, you're going to see costs go up if everything else stays the same. So you have these puts and takes. But at least this time around, we're seeing, and actually last year we also had a modest change in the budget. So this is the second year in a row of a modest change. And as seen on the charts, on page 5 of the packet, much of what we're talking about is electricity costs. You have some other water and sewer. We just talked about Wssc earlier, or in our case, a lot of our water is from the city of Rockville. You do have water and sewer rates that come into play, and then much smaller elements with regard to fuel oil and propane, and then natural gas. So those are the major elements here. The fuel costs for our vehicles are separate. That's not part of this The other element of this is the procurement process itself. The county has a fixed contract in place so that the utility rates basically are unchanged from FY19 to FY20, although the county does have the opportunity to look more towards a wholesale purchasing process, which it will be looking towards perhaps next year or the year after. And it's sort of a mixed bag across the agencies as well. The school system has a wholesale purchasing process in place now, as does WSSC. But the college has a fixed contract, although they're also looking at some wholesale purchase opportunities like us. So it's sort of a mixed bag. The energy managers from the different agencies meet regularly to discuss trends and issues and opportunities and try to take advantage of the experience from the other. And you can hear some of that today if you'd like if you have specific questions about some of the initiatives that are going forward. But with regard to the utilities NDA, staff is comfortable with the NDA budget as proposed and suggest you just if you have questions, we've got the folks here that can try to help illuminate some answers for you.
Okay, Mr. Dice, Mr. Kaufman, any comments? You want to introduce
Well, I
the
think
team?
I appreciate Mr. Levchenko's, David Dice, by the way, Director of General Services. I think his customary thorough report. But I wanted to highlight the fact that what he appropriately recognized in a dollars and cents way as modest decrease is juxtaposed against increases in the county's office footprint. We have, in fact, opened new facilities and renovated a number of other facilities and still seen a reduction in our utility costs. Mr. Levchenko also mentioned that in some cases, costs can go up because nothing saves money like a motor that doesn't work. So when we go in and renovate, sometimes we're actually seeing some increases, but the rate of increase is significantly low. So the combination of library renovations, recreation center renovations, we're in the process, for instance, of replacing windows and envelopes at Caulfield Center. So there's a number of things that we're doing with our older facilities that are also reducing our energy footprint, which is all very good.
Terrific. No, I think that's great progress. I'm sure you're addressing the flooding issue at the Caulfield Center too.
We have perpetual flooding issues with a couple of facilities that are larger, symptoms of larger problems, yes.
And colleagues?
Yes. I wanted to ask about the utility costs by agency. Where are we now with our likely actual for FY19?
Eric?
Yeah, our actual on 19, apologies, Eric Kaufman. Our actual on 19 is tracking within budget. It'll probably come in a little less. One of the things that Director Dice didn't mention is in 19 we absorbed a very large pass-through from a FERC settlement of charges that was on nearly $500,000 and is continuing to 20. So we've actually absorbed that while holding the budget flat.
A FERC settlement? What do you mean?
So basically there was, and not to get into technical details, but there was a FERC was challenged between the balance between how transmission costs are handled, the big lines between the western United States and the eastern United States, and how those costs are apportioned, and that they were unfairly pushed to the western side of the country. So there was a settlement that basically then FERC passes those costs through, and those are passed down through the utility to us.
Because I noticed in the actual for 17, you're at 33.7 million. In 18, you got it down to 32.6 million. But you're saying the actual for 19 is going to be a couple $1 million higher than the actual for 18?
Again, this anticipates, this is I can let Bruce Meyer from OMB flesh that out some more, but this anticipates, as you see on the bottom of that page, the introduction of a couple of new facilities. The Wheaton Library Rec Center will be coming online. We've also, for this fiscal year, absorbing Glen Echo Park into the county's management of facility system. We bear those utility costs as a part of that takeover from the National Park Service. So some of that represents this increase in facilities as well. It has been, as Mr. Levchenko pointed out, our trend to reduce our energy costs. We are starting to see the benefit of our energy systems improvements across facilities. We are seeing improvements and significant reductions generating out of our microgrids. So, and the aggressive approach we've taken to installing photovoltaic panels on building rooftops and ground mounts. We're now in the early stages of seeing those payoffs, and we expect those trends to continue into the future.
So Eric, when you said your actual is trending close to is that the approved FY19?
Yes.
So you're likely to be 35 million or so?
And again, that includes not just us, but also there's liquor, the other funds in there. We're likely to be around 26.24 in 19, maybe coming in a little less.
26.
Yes.
That's for, I think you're referring to Table 3.
Right.
I think you were,
Okay.
Mr. Raymer, you were looking...
Am I looking at the wrong table, or?
Well, the tables depend on what you're trying to get. The utility cost...
Money, that's what I'm trying to get.
The NDA is shown on Table 4.
Right.
Actually, do you happen to know what Montgomery College is doing to lower their costs so much? Ah, sorry, sir. Please.
Good afternoon, Mike Whitcomb, Montgomery College.
Sorry, Mike. Yes, welcome.
I think it was, as basically most of the savings is really the fact that we had over budgeted for the earlier year, and that we're now in a more reasonable budget. It just simply was that we didn't know at the time whether or not the Empower rates were going to stay high. Turns out they went low. We also had a pretty good season for lower electricity consumption. And we had a new contract come into play where we had actually a penny per kilowatt hour reduction, and so that added to the surplus that we had, and so we're now at a more what we consider to be a more reasonable rate.
Good work on getting us to fund your over budget. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Conversely, of course, you see the MCPS
yes.
usage is up, although I don't think that's surprising given the volume of additional space they are building.
Right.
Which we, of course, pay for and approve. So I know Mr. Gallagher is sitting back there. Or Sheila. Sheila's the program manager. Mr. Gallagher actually will be retiring.
Yes, we heard that.
In July, after many years, including time as an energy manager in this group. But Ms. Plank, do you want to step up and give MCPS's perspective?
Welcome. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Sheila Plank. Yes, one of the things I did with the packet that I sent to Mr. Levchenko was a listing of all the schools where all the renovations we're doing. We are adding an awful lot of square footage. One of the things I also put in the packet is the square footage by year, and I think this year it was around 250,000, and it just continues to increase. So, yeah.
2,000 feet?
Square feet.
Square feet?
250,000 square feet. So yes, that's why our utility bills do continue to rise a little bit. And then also keep in mind that we do have a tremendous amount of community use in our schools. So we have, churches come in on the weekends, we have the sports activities and all the things in the evenings as well. So that's another reason for an increase in some of our prices.
And not many solar arrays, but
17 now.
Yep.
Getting there. We need some ground mounts. That's what we need. We need some land.
Yeah, you have a lot of roofs too. Okay, but Mr. Levchenko, are we?
I didn't have anything else to add.
Okay.
She had other questions.
I think we're in great shape on this NDA. Colleagues, anybody else? Okay. Thank you all. Mr. Dice, we didn't give you the haircut.